Tap into the psychology of engagement and more. This is where we talk about life, learning, and everything in between. This is the Lifelong Podcast, a show for those of you who love to ask why. It's because we're marketers. It's because we're coaches. It's because we're change makers. Each week, we dive into the big questions and explore the psychology of engagement with strategies, tactics, and special guests along the way. Now, here's your guide, the visibility hacking queen herself, Coach Molly. Hey, visibility hackers, and welcome back to this episode of the Lifelong Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Molly from visibilityhacking.com, and as per usual, it's an absolute pleasure to spend this time with you guys. Whether you're listening to the Lifelong Podcast on your favorite podcast platform or you're watching in video format on our YouTube channel, I love spending this time with you guys. Today, in this season, we're diving into the psychology of marketing and psychology of engagement. And I hope you enjoy this series. We're diving into not only traditional psychological tips and tools and techniques, but we're also diving deep into understanding how people learn. Because as marketers and as coaches, we have these two magical hats that we have to wear. Not only do we have to create incredible products that are going to get incredible results for our people, but we also have to make sure that we're finding the right people and matching them to the correct programs. So I hope this lesson teaches you what you need to understand in that respect. So today we're diving in to talk specifically about Androgogy. And what? Well, Androgogy is the understanding of the methods and practices that are used specifically for adult learners. And it got started by this guy over here. This is Malcolm Knowles, and he was a psychologist and an educator. And what he looked at was the difference between children and adults. So he said there are different ways that we teach children. So if we think back, I was talking about this a few episodes ago about this guy called John Locke and his idea that we come into the world as these blank slates, or the tabula rasa as he would call it. We as humans are born in with a blank slate in our brains. We don't have preconceived ideas or learnings that we're born with, but instead it's through our activities, through our engagements with people, through our experiences that we're able to gain not only skills, but an understanding of the world that we live in. And this is going to be fundamentally different than the brain of an adult. When we're working with kids, we have to teach them actual skills. We have to teach them this is how you do something. But with an adult, we have a completely different type of student that's walking into our programs. We have a student who already has ideas in their mind. They already have experiences. They may already have biases towards what you're learning, or they may have skills that directly or indirectly relate to what you're talking about, and therefore they have a different understanding and a different perspective on the problem. Not saying this is bad. This is a beautiful complexity that comes with teaching adults things. And so fundamentally, if you're going to remember only one thing about androgogy, about the study of teaching adults, what I want you to understand is that when we're working with adults, what we need to be focusing on is teaching the process and not necessarily on teaching the content. You're probably looking at me like, that sounds really slimy. That sounds like you're not giving them what they need, but it's actually so far from the truth. I'm going to show you these 6 principles to adult learning that are going to help you develop your programs, your coaching programs, your online courses, and your marketing messages to better connect with your adult learners, to better connect with your students who are acquiring new skills, new knowledge, and new experiences with you, the attractive character. The first principle you need to understand is the need to know. Each of our adult learners, they want to know the why behind what we're learning. And so when you're developing your programs, I want you to continuously tie your programs and everything they're learning to their tangible result. That way, they are able to make that connection of why they are learning that specific skill. I'm sure you remember back in your school days, there was times where you'd walk into a lesson and you go, I have no idea what this has to do with anything. I know that was me in a lot of my math classes. I didn't quite understand what that connection to real life was. And so for me, I kind of started disconnecting from that material and I stopped paying attention. And we don't want that for our students. We want our students to stay engaged, and we do that by helping meet that need they have, to make sure that they know the why behind what they're learning. The next concept you need to understand is the concept of self-concept. So each of our individual learners needs to be seen, and they need to be treated as both capable or able to perform, as well as have the space to be self-directed, to pick their own path. And so what you can do is create environments that help nurture those self-directed learning skills. For example, in visibility hacking, we have the Visibility Vault, and that is a big resource space for our students. In there are a selection of different trainings that help my students pick the paths that they'd like to deepen their knowledge in. So for example, if you wanted to learn more about creating your marketing plan, there's a whole bunch of trainings in there that will help you go through that path. If you want to know more about meditating and taking that moment for yourself to have calmness and bring more gratitude into your life so that you build that solid foundation so that your legacy can last forever and you're able to have incredible impact, well, we have specific trainings for that as well. So our students are able to pick the path that they want to develop their skills in, and they have that self-directed ability. So look for opportunities to do that in your own programs as well. The next principle we're going to talk about is recognizing prior experience. And we've already talked about this in this episode. Each of our students comes into our class with a beautiful variety of previous skills, previous knowledge, and previous biases and abilities. And this is a richness. Do not ever look at this as a detriment. Do not ever look at this as something that's bad or negative. That beautiful, beautiful diversity of skills, experiences, and values in our classes, regardless if they're in person or online, if they're synchronous or asynchronous, gives us the experience of learning from other perspectives, as well as adds that richness to the learning experience of all of our students, especially if your students work in cohorts or in classes together. Something else that you can do to help fill this need and meet this principle is to adopt more experiential learning techniques in your programs. Allow your students to work on projects and to try things, which allow them to tap into that previous knowledge and those previously existing skills, as well as in our brain, it builds stronger connections between knowledge that we already have and knowledge that is new. The next principle you need to understand is each of our students has a different readiness to learn. Adult learners, for the most part, want to learn things that they can apply directly to their own lives. We want to make sure that the content we're teaching is relevant and applicable. And so what I would recommend you do is consider how your program relates directly and applies directly to the desired result. We've talked about tangible results. We also have to think about that more woo-woo kind of feeling of community within our programs as well. When we create programs that are designed around tangible results and we guide our students to understanding how this fits into their lives, we're able to have such incredible impact on the development of that new skill for that student. The next principle of adult learning is the concept of learning orientation. And the fundamental to this is that adult learners will learn, they want to learn skills that will help them perform tasks. It won't just help them reduce something in their life. Most importantly, it will enable them to be able to do something they weren't previously able to do before. And so what you could do is consider using project-based learning and problem-based learning in your program. Also, give them more personal case studies. Show them a variety of different ways that the skill you're teaching can be applied. That way, when you have an asynchronous learning environment or you've created an evergreen learning environment, what you're going to be doing is giving them a ton of different case study examples so that they can find a different perspective to the same tangible result that you're teaching, to the same piece of knowledge and skill that you're teaching. They're just able to find different places in order to see that from. The next principle we need to talk about is motivation. Adult learners are responsive to both intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is motivation that comes from within, where extrinsic motivation is motivation that comes from outside. So in a work environment, an extrinsic motivator might be a higher salary, whereas an intrinsic motivator might be that sense of community you have with your coworkers. So how do we recreate that in the classroom? And we do that by creating more goal-setting opportunities, by giving more rewards and building that into our program structure. So for example, if you build a series of badges for your students to achieve throughout your program, that's going to feed into that extrinsic motivation. At the end of your program, when you have a graduation and you say that those students who have completed this program are now entered into this different level of community, that then bonds those students together and gives them that intrinsic sense of community, that internal motivator. Working with both of your senses of motivation, you're able to skyrocket not only your level of participation, the knowledge acquisition, but also the retention of that knowledge over a longer period of time. You're able to have that deeper impact, that longer lasting impact on those students. So that's it, my friends. Those are the big 6 principles of adult learning that you should be incorporating into each and every one of your programs. So let's recap before I leave. First thing is understanding need to know. The second thing is understanding self-concept and giving your people the ability to be self-directed. The third thing is understanding prior experience and letting that be a beautiful, rich diversity. We next want to understand each of our students' readiness to learn, their learning orientation, and finally, we want to play in to the different factors of motivation. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. I'm Coach Molly from visibilityhacking.com. This is the Lifelong Podcast. I will see you in our next episode. And until then, remember, I love you and be excellent to each other.